Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Shields Up Security with Blueshift Cybersecurity Managed SOC. My name is Mark Campbell, and I am a Senior Director at Cigent Technologies, and I have the pleasure to be joined by Greg Scanzi, the CTO of Blueshift Cybersecurity. Say hello, Greg.
Hey, how you doing?
So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so to talk about cybersecurity, our favorite topic. We're going to give you, if you're not familiar with Cigent and Blueshift, just a couple of minutes overview on what we do. Talk a little bit about some of the things we're seeing with regards to cybersecurity, specifically around ransomware and exfiltration of data. Talk a little bit about zero trust and some of the gaps that we see. We'll talk about Managed Cigent Data Defense, and this is a cybersecurity software that's designed to protect your data. We'll go through some practical use cases as well, and at the end, we'll save some time for some Q&A. If you do have some questions, please use the questions tool in your webinar platform, and we'll get to those at the end. I'll do my best to kind of see them as they're coming in, and if we can work them into to the talk, we'll do that, but we definitely want to get to them at the end as well. Okay, so a little bit about Cigent. What is Cigent? And Cigent is a cybersecurity company, and we are focused 100% on protecting data. And this is protecting data from ransomware, from theft, and even destruction. Right? And that's some of the things that we've seen is sometimes the bad guys want to just destroy it. We combine machine learning with Stepup Authentication and zero trust principles. And we do all of this and encrypt files at the same time to provide multiple layers of security. And the end result is that we get a very efficient and high efficacy system to protect data. And really the goal here is to reduce risk and often cases to address any regulatory or governance requirements that you may have. I'll let Greg talk about Blueshift here.
No problem. So hey, I'm Greg. I'm the CTO of Blueshift, like Mark had said. I'm also the co-founder here at Blueshift. I'm very familiar with Cigent. I was also before Blueshift started, I was actually CTO of Cigent for a while. I helped them develop some of the technology on the hardware side that they deliver their solutions with. So what we do at Blueshift, we're more, instead of being a product or a platform that you get, we're the kind of tactical side of cyber, right? So we have a platform. Our platform gathers information from all kinds of different sources, endpoints, cloud, EDRs, and all those sorts of things, including Cigent software. And we manage the cybersecurity operations of our clients, right? So we monitor them. We look for anomalies in their environments. We respond to those anomalies when we detect them, and hopefully try to reduce the dwell time that attackers and adversaries are in our customers' environments. We like to utilize things like Cigent, especially when we talk about the things that Mark's going to talk about today with their Shields Up defense. It helps us in that response modality when something bad happens. So when we detect an event, you'll be able to see as we kind of go through and how the technology works, we're able to assure that data does not get manipulated, it doesn't get exfiltrated, it doesn't get destroyed. And I'll talk about data destruction here in a second, but we can assure those things don't happen to really important data while our analysts are responding to a severe incident. And that means a lot to customers, right? So depending on what business that you're in, adversaries are going to look to do things like encrypt your data. If you're in more critical infrastructure, government, those sorts of things where you have to deal with things like cyber warfare, that's where adversaries want to go. And they really don't care about stealing your data. They only care about destruction, right? So Cigent can help with that as well. So what I'll talk about as we go through the day, and you'll hear me pipe in, I'll talk about some of the things that we do from our end and how we utilize Cigent Data Defense to help protect our clients and help that response sort of thing. You hear me piping. I'm very opinionated. I live and breathe cybersecurity. It's just what I do. So as we kind of go through, you'll hear me pipe in. And if you have questions, I'm obviously open to those sorts of things as well. So back to you, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Greg. All right. So what's the big need? And Greg mentioned some of the bad things that can happen, but you think about, this is nothing new, right? We've been trying to protect our stuff, our data and assets for many, many years. And why are we keep doing this? And the reality is that advanced threats will always find a way in. They always do. No matter, we're always being it's a race, right? And we're always trying to keep up, and these advanced threats always find a way in. One of my former coworkers was a research analyst, and he was attributed with a quote that still resonates with me. It says, there are two types of organizations: those that know they've been compromised and those that don't. And that's something that I just remember that and over. And when we think about how do these advanced threats get in, we see it in multiple ways. We see perimeter attacks, and this is using, attacking the technologies that's at the perimeter. And that's where a lot of the spend goes, right? This will build that strong wall at the edge. But we've seen vulnerabilities in like the Barracuda email gateway, where they were sending attachments that would get scanned, and then that scan would launch malware inside and then traverse. We've seen it with the Fortinet firewalls recently, VPN tools like Citrix and Pulse Secure or Avante. These have all been compromised. The perimeter, they're going to find things and make their way inside. And once they get in, they can traverse. The number one cause still remains internal threats, and specifically phishing, right? So we look at these attacks that start with an email, and these emails are getting better, especially when the adversaries are using things like AI to craft them and make them look really good. So people click on them. I get the text messages often too that's, will say, pretending to be my boss and wanting me to do something. So it happens often. It's still the number one threat vector. And then we could look at supply chain, and you think about some of the big breaches that we've had with the tools, especially some of the open source tools. And we saw Log4j, it was a huge Apache vulnerability. SolarWinds last year. We saw MoveIt IT or MoveIt, that was a big one. And so when we look at the supply chain, that makes up a big chunk of the source of the breaches as well.
Yeah, 3CX was a good one too, where they, compromised a piece of software, and then you had a vendor actually sign that software and distribute it, right?
Right.
And one of the things people need to realize, and this is something I say when I give presentations, and I think it's really apt to kind of go over here just really fast, is when you think about how you're going to defend your business or how you're going to defend your customers, you have to really put it in a mathematical, because I'm a math guy, right? So in a mathematical sort of frame set. So what I tell people is, if you're going to try to play the preventative game, right? So you're going to prevent all adversaries from getting into your environments, no matter what those environments are. If you're small, big, large, enterprise, whatever, you're playing a game that you have to be perfect. And we all know perfection doesn't exist. So when people put a majority of their cybersecurity spend on 100% preventatives, I'm going to keep the bad guys out, realize they're putting themselves on the wrong end of an insolvable equation, right? You're not going to ever be perfect. So if you don't look into those sorts of things that can protect when that happens, that can detect and respond when that happens, when it happens, you're going to be behind the eight ball. And that's where you don't want to be, right? The longer that an adversary sits in an environment, the more damage they can do, the more costly it is to remediate that, the more data they're able to get to, right? The more data they're able to exfiltrate. And that's where the problems start to happen, when they start to manipulate data that sits there, which manipulate to me is anywhere from changing data, which could be detrimental in things like industrial control systems and operational technology environments to um, um, encrypting data, which is another manipulation of data, right? So encrypting it so people can't access it, to exfiltrating that data, which they'll do for that double extortion, right? So they're going to take your data, and if you don't pay, they're going to start doing things like calling your customers and stealing that data and posting it on the dark web and those sorts of things. Those are all those post exploitation things that happen, and they're going to happen to everybody. It's a matter of time. If you have it, and everybody has valuable enough data, there's an innumerable number of companies out there for adversaries to get to. They just haven't gotten to you yet, right? If you haven't been breached yet. So playing that game of we're going to be perfect to me is a great way to proposite to put your business in a place where you're going to lose. And I don't ever like to be on the losing end of anything. So to me, when you have solutions that can help you detect and respond as quickly, again, when you talk about the Cigent technology, that's the important piece, right? To be able to respond quickly, to limit the damage they can do, limit the information they can get, so you can quickly beat them at their own game when it happens. So sorry, I tend to be verbose at times, but this is a subject that resonates with me a lot.
I can tell, and we've seen this. It's in the news every day. Just last week, there was a Washington County in Pennsylvania, and I don't know if you saw this, Greg, but they shut down the whole county, and they decided to pay the ransom. And it was $350,000, and a lot of people were upset, like, "Why are you paying the ransom?" And one of the things that was really interesting about this is it was exactly what Greg said. It was that double hit, the extortion as well. And they had taken all of the Department of Child Services data and threatened to post all that online. So if you think about these young people and just putting all their records out there and their families' records, so the cyber criminals said, "Hey, if you pay, we'll delete all this." And they paid, right? And they said, well, okay, this is their business model. If we pay them, they don't delete it, then they won't get any more business. And I'm thinking, well, there's really no honor among thieves. But so we'll see how that turns out. But
You're
it's
dealing with criminals, right? So if you trust a criminal, I don't trust criminals, right? So,
right.
and that's the problem is that and I never advocate for paying ransom. Obviously, I don't think anybody ever should, but that's me talking as a tech guy, right? Not talking as a business owner. Sometimes we as tech people need to understand that that really comes down to a business decision. Like, is if there's no other way to get it back, do you either go out of business or you pay the ransom and you hope that you get your data back, or they don't, release your information. But you're dealing with scumbags, right? So you really can't trust them. But it's understandable to me. But the best thing to happen is to not let it happen in the first place, right?
That's
So
right. And even IBM did a publication on this. They do it every year, the cost of their data breach. And they found that organizations that paid the ransom, it didn't significantly reduce the overall cost of the incident, even if they paid it. I mean, there's still lots of expenses. So let's talk a little bit about why some of the things we've been doing haven't really been all that effective. And when we look at some of these, or at least, or why it matters so much right now, is some of these high profile attacks that we mentioned. We've also seen a lot of government initiatives. We saw it was a couple of months ago, all the countries came together, the United Nations, and say, we're not going to pay the ransomware. We've seen executive orders in the US. We've seen new requirements to report cyber incidents. And these are things that really impact organizations, right? We also see remote workforce where we have people working remotely and maybe don't have that benefit of that full security stack within their home office or remote office. And then of course there's just the failures of the controls, whether they're misconfigured or have vulnerabilities. So this is a continuing problem, and it's going to continue to happen, right? The best we can do, as Greg mentioned, is put up the best defense we can and try to be preventative in how we do it. But we can't choose not to be a target. So
that's
let's talk.
100% true, by the way. And you're going to see as you go through, you talk about regulations, and I think that government regulation isn't always the answer. But the problem we have in cyber, and we've had for a long time, is that, you know, government moves at the speed of a very slow, large ship, right? So trying to turn that ship takes a lot of effort. They don't keep up with what adversaries are actually doing, right? Their tactics, techniques, and procedures, what we call TTPs, change on a daily basis. They're always changing what they do and how they do things, and what tools they use, and those sorts of things. And you have to be able to adapt to those sorts of things. Baseline level of, you know, cybersecurity defense readiness is needed. I'm not sure it needs to be legislated, but that's what they're trying to do with things we're going to talk about later with some of the security uh, certifications and things that they're going to require of certain uh, contractors and things like that. They're trying to get to a place to say, okay, we can at least have a base level of understanding of these are all good things we need to do, a good starting places. And that's the problem is a lot of companies, especially SMBs and SMEs, don't know where to start, right? And that they have to get that good starting point. Um, and as we'll see, as they start to get into more of those controls, how utilizing stuff like ours and like what Cigent has can help them reach both the maturity levels they need to get to, the compliance levels they need to get to, but more important, the being secure as an organization, right? That's what really comes down to is you really need to understand that your organization is going to be secure, that you can respond to those things, and not become that, not have those breaches when they happen cost you your business or hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right, exactly. And when we look at why a lot of the security technology out there fails, or at least these bad guys are still getting in, it's because they've changed, right? They are designing malware specifically to go undetected. Again, that cost of a breach study from IBM, I think, was really interesting. They said the average time to detect and contain an advanced threat was 277 days.
Yeah.
And
Think
and
about
that's
that. Think about that. Think about the cost of getting an adversary out of your environment when they've been there for 277 days, right? Because how did you detect that? Or how did they detect that? Sure, it wasn't their antivirus or EDR or any other systems they had in place because they've been in there for 277 days. They were either contacted by the FBI, they had a ransom note on their screen, customers are calling them because their stuff's available on the dark web and Pastebin or something. It was a very bad event that got them to that point. And then it's all the things that happen after that. People need to understand it. It's a cost of attorneys. It's a cost of forensic investigators. If you have regulatory or compliance issues, you're going to have to call your regulators and report. If you HIPAA, CMMC, those sorts of things, you're going to be calling and telling, people that you have your contracts with or your customers or who the federal government or the EPA or whoever you have to report to. Yes, we were breached, and then you need to be able to prove. Well, here's what they stole, and if you can't prove it, then guess what? They stole everything. That's not a place you want to find yourself in. And that I think that fits really well into the paradigm of what Cigent does is like, okay, now we can start to show as you kind of go through, well, they didn't get to this stuff because we were able to lock it down. I think that's those type of controls, um, when you have to deal with breaches, they mean it's a saving grace when you can go and say, yes, I know for sure that nothing was exfiltrated out of my environment, right? Because now it's not reportable. So, yeah. So again, I'm just going to keep popping
yeah,
in because this
it's
stuff.
really, that's an interesting topic. And when I think of 277 days, it just seems like such a long time for these attackers to be lingering. But if you think about this, some of the big ones, like SolarWinds, for example, FireEye, one of the leading security vendors out there, some of the smartest security people on the planet, they were a victim of this. It was in their network for over a year before they
Mhm.
found it. Same with Microsoft, same case. And they've got hundreds, probably thousands of security engineers. And it took them this long to find it. And the FireEye team just got lucky. And a security analyst noticed that one of his friends, an employee, was in another country when he knew he wasn't. And that's how they ended up finding it. So that, they got lucky on it. So
Because
these,
people think. I mean, I think most non people who don't work in cybersecurity or don't do incident response, they think it's always a piece of malware, right? Oh, it's a piece of malware and they're using malware, we can detect it, but realize it's really not. And most of the time, especially those breaches like that, they're not using malware. They're using living off the land tools. They're using things in the environment that are already there. They may have gotten in with maybe a phishing email or something like that with a piece of malware to begin with. Maybe it could do with a vulnerability. There's so many ways in, like we just talked about with again, you can't be perfect. They're going to find a way in somehow. But once they're in, it's not like they're throwing malware on every machine that's going to fire off. You're not going to get this Christmas tree effect. They're these guys, the adversaries are not what people were taught, especially older people like me, fat kids in their mom's basements eating pizza. That's not who the adversary is today. The adversary today is very sophisticated. They're well funded. They make a lot of money doing this. They're technically very astute, right? They understand the environments they're in. They understand how to manage Active Directory environments and what you can do in those type of environments and things like that. So the tools that they use aren't always, they're not going to just flash on the screen for you. You have to be able to put together the story of, okay, I see this tool and it's being used in this way, and that matches this TTP that I talked about earlier. That's a malicious event, and now we need to respond to that. And that's why these things happen. That's why they go on for so long, because these guys are smart. I mean, the bad guys are smart too. And that's why you need to have, those sorts of tools we're going to talk about to help prevent that unauthorized access to data, to be able to detect and respond to those sorts of things, to stop them from getting those to that data. That's the important stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting that the living off the land comics, they're using trusted and approved protocols like RDP. Where I call that the ransomware distribution protocol, right? But that's enabled on many networks, and it's a good way to spread the ransomware.
Oh yeah, people used to have that out. We call it, well, yeah, same thing. That's a great nomenclature for it. But yeah, and again, people just don't realize what their internal attack surface looks like, what their external attack surface looks like, and it's huge. Again, people tend to, and organizations tend to think that their IT department or their MSP is the be all end all. And they don't want to pay them a lot of money, right? So their MSPs are usually underfunded. Customers are trying to get everything they can out of their MSP. So, I want you to make sure that my systems run, which, IT's job is to make sure that systems run and the business uses technology to be profitable. Very different from the mindset of a security analyst, right? Our job is to make sure that, things are safe and that adversaries aren't getting in. So our goals are very, very different, but usually customers don't understand that. They just want the IT guy to take care of everything. And we wonder why people get breached, right? I'm not saying that IT people don't know how to secure things. That's not it at all. It's just an impossible job. You have to expect to do everything, and if you spread someone that thin, a failure is going to happen somewhere. So you have to have the tools. You have to have the tools and the talent in the right places to be able to defend organizations today. So
Right. And when we look at some of the tools that a lot of organizations have in place today, especially the analytics, the logs, the SIMs, those are great and they can help you, but they're not real time, right? You're looking at something that already happened. You're also lacking the visibility at the endpoint, right? So where the data actually lives, and that's an area where yes, you might be able to detect it, but oftentimes that damage has been done. So what is it that we really need? And Greg's been talking about this, is the tools, is having some additional layers of control. And again, we're focused on the data part here.
hey, we got a question that I'd like to answer if you don't mind.
Sure.
So Paul asked, could cyber insurance support tools like Cigent, Blueshift to be part of the solutions for the industry, as well as government? And they are recommending tools like so. Yes, we actually Blueshift. I can talk from Blueshift's perspective. We actually have worked with insurance carriers to help them understand risks that go into things. So putting our platform on and assessing risk of clients and things like that. But insurance companies they're just like the government, right? So they do not they're not up to the snuff on the latest and greatest things that are happening, but they're trying to get people to a base level of technical acumen when it comes to defensive cyber. So things like SIM and things like Cigent, those sorts of things. They're starting to say, if you don't have these technologies and you're not proving that you're using these technologies, we can't write you a cyber risk policy. Because 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm not an insurance expert, but 5 or 6 years ago, insurance companies see an opportunity, right? So there's cyber out there. We can write these policies, make some money. And then the bad guys started figuring out, oh, you have insurance for this. We're going to start charging these outrageous amounts of ransom because you can put it on your insurance everywhere. Anyways, and the insurance companies went, oh, wait, hold on. No, we're kind of taking a bath in this. We need to do something different. So now they're starting to, I don't want to say prescribe, but they're starting to say, if you don't have these certain tools, in place, that we're not going to write you a policy, we're not going to pay on your policy. I think some of that is good. They need to stay. I'm not a big fan of what we call checkbox compliance, right? So you just need things that check the boxes, but they're not providing any real tactical defensive cyber value to your company. There are things that we do that do help check the boxes that we'll talk about. It's the same thing with Cigent, and I think that insurance companies can absolutely benefit from what we do in working with us. At least I know now that we're starting to see that, again, the types of solutions that Blueshift does and Cigent does, that insurance companies are starting to at least give discounts, if not whole out saying, if you don't have these technologies, we're not going to write a policy. So
It's an interesting topic, and I'll just throw in the underwriters who are underwriting these policies are actually looking at, what is the risk, and that's what insurance companies are all about. And just like getting your automobile insurance, if you are a risky driver, your premiums, your monthly premium is going to be much higher. The same approach is with the cyber insurance.
it's just so much more difficult for them, right? So they have actuary tables. They can tell you, based on your height, your weight, your physical activity levels, what you eat. Those are probably within a few weeks of the day you're going to die, right? So they got that data down. Cars only work in a certain way, right? They have the gas pedal, brake pedal. You can drive. You go past the speed limit, whatever. The parameters are all very well known when it comes to writing or understanding an algorithm that can calculate risk when it comes to those things. Cyber is a whole different animal, right? Because what one business may have from a networking attack surface end user standpoint could be vastly different from the same type of company in the same vertical. They may have vastly different technologies. One may be all on-prem or hybrid. The other one may be all cloud. One may do work from home. One may not. So the amount of variables that go into understanding risk from a cyber perspective for an insurance company are orders of magnitude larger than most other things that they deal with. So it makes it hard for them to come up with what's an acceptable risk from a company, for one, and what do we charge for that. So when they're starting to say is, okay, we know there's some base level technologies, right? So you need to have two-factor, you need to have a SIM, you need to have AV or EDR, those sorts of things that are just kind of standard. The cost of the ante for poker, right? I'm not a card player, but whatever that, the minimum cost to play business in the environment. So they're starting to add those things in, and you'll probably see more of that, as time goes on. But again, they're always going to be behind the eight ball. Just because your insurance company says you have to have these 4 technologies doesn't mean that, okay, I put those 4 technologies in, okay, I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about anything. That's very far from the truth, right? You need to be thinking more proactive and more strategic around your defensive cyber than just what my insurance company or what my regulators tell me I need to do, or what my auditors tell me I need to do.
Right. And that's where you were looking at some of the additional controls, in addition to those table stakes controls that Greg mentioned, to have real-time response and mitigations that are actually catching the malware in the act, right? And being able to integrate this with the existing stack. In the case with Blueshift, having a managed SOC, being able to have all the pieces work together nicely. So what do organizations actually do now? Like and you've probably heard of this term zero trust. And zero trust, in essence, assumes that the adversary is already inside, or that the network is open already to everyone. And it kind of goes back to that quote I was saying earlier about the 2 types of orgs: ones that know they've been compromised and ones that don't. We should assume compromise. And when we do that, we look at the controls that have been in place. And these are common controls that most organizations use. And we start with at the perimeter, right? And this is where you have your your firewalls and other types of gateway type of appliances. And I call this the pathway to the data, right? This is where or where the attackers are able to automate and try and find paths to the data. Next, we see a lot of investment in applications, APIs, workload security. And this is where we're seeing stronger authentications and looking at making sure everything's encrypted and so forth. And then the users and devices. And as we start to see, we have been seeing a lot of this remote user, are we checking that endpoint posture? Is it running AV? Is the device new? Have we seen it before? Can we multi-factor the user to ensure that we know who that user is? But one of the areas that we haven't seen any attention paid to, and this is where our solution here really makes a difference, is applying these same principles at the data layer. So this is adding that zero trust to files and folders and even partitions on the storage directly. So let's talk a little bit about how we actually do this. There's a few things that we do, and this is what the Cigent Data Defense software can do, and this is 100% managed by Blueshift. And it starts with some of the basics of being able to protect file access with risk-based MFA. So think about trying to access a file. Maybe it's the My Documents folder. Well, I'll get into this more in a minute. But being able to enforce that MFA, that step-up authentication at the file level itself, file and folders. Also use strong encryption to encrypt that data and even hide that data. So having whole entire partitions hidden. Again, we'll get to that in just a moment. And probably the most important thing, and this is the shields up component, is being able to stop that ransomware in the act before it can really go through and ravage the network or all the systems. So let's talk about these just a minute or two on each. First, we'll start with the step-up authentication. This is, what you're seeing here is a screenshot of the actual software. And there's multiple ways that this can be implemented and deployed, but the core essence is that we're monitoring access to protected files. And when that file is attempted to be accessed, it can prompt a step-up authentication to that user. So let's say you're trying to access something in the My Documents folder, and you try to access that, and it will pop up and say, hey, Mark, we see you're trying to access this file. We need you to authenticate to do it. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's going to be a pain in the butt. Well, there's a lot of policies you can put in there to really make it user-friendly. So you can think of a security dial on there where you can say, we're going to make you authenticate every hour, every 30th time you've answered the file. That's one of the policies we have internally at Cigent, is every, I think it's 20 files you access, it'll ask you. And if you talk to organizations and say, hey, we got hit with ransomware, we lost 19 files, they'll take it, right? That's not bad. So the idea here is that ransomware is not going to be able, or malware, whether it's trying to ransom or steal or destroy, is not going to be able to access data if it has to do a multi-factor authentication to it. And so if you see, and it will also do this for other applications. So let's say a PowerShell is trying to access a PowerPoint, that can prop up an authentication saying, hey, this application is trying to access this, we need you to authenticate. So this is catching it in the act. This can be applied toward, by default to certain types of files, locations like the My Documents. Again, you can turn this on to the most extreme where it's doing it every time, or you can dial that down a little bit where it does it every session-based or number of files. And also it integrates with the MFA that you have already. And that could just be the Windows hello. So you could do facial recognition, or if you've got a MFA tool that you use already, you can use that. So it's designed to really integrate in with what you're already using. The Secure Vault is another very interesting tool to help protect data. And this is a tool that is used to enforce access controls at the hardware level. So the Cigent Data Defense actually talks to the firmware on the drive itself, and it locks out these ranges on the firmware. So we can say, hey, we're going to have a hidden partition or a new partition, and we're going to put all of our sensitive files. So maybe I'm a coder and I want to put my source code there, or if I'm in finance and I've got some sensitive M&A information there, or I'm just an executive and I'm traveling a lot and I'm concerned about my laptop. Perhaps I just want to make sure that if I get stopped or someone's going to go through my laptop, all that data is hidden. So it actually does it at the hardware level. If you go into the Windows Disk Manager, you're not going to see the partition is totally hidden. And it, again, locked down at the hardware range. So we're looking at the drive itself, finding the ranges and saying these are locked until that user goes and actually unlocks them. So let's say ransomware does come and hit your system and it maybe deletes the operating system or makes it unusable. That partition will still remain. So if the system gets cloned or wiped, that partition will not be able to be touched, and you can always restore your system and then go back and unlock that partition. Everything is still there. So it's a very interesting and unique patented technology that takes advantage of some of the hardware controls that we see on some of the modern drives that come standard in many laptops, to be able to apply this added layer of security. And then the shields up component. This is something that we've taken this technology and really made this an organizational types of solution to stop the spread. Greg talked about living off the land and these attacks going and traversing throughout the network. Well, we call this a shields up. And so let's say a attack or a threat is found, and maybe that threat is found in the Blueshift SOC, one of the tools that they have, or maybe it's one of the endpoints, an EDR solution, or even a Cigent solution detects a threat. We can instantly go into shields up mode. So this will protect all of the files, instantly locking them. So it'll require that user to unlock, and that could be applied to a single PC or groups or across the entire organization. But this is something where typically if you have a threat come in, you're telling everyone disconnect, unplug, shut it down. Now you can go into a threat alert condition where you have some additional security controls and ensure that your data is safe. And this helps really avoid a lot of the business disruptions. Right now, you still may want to disconnect some of the systems. It's just depending on the nature of the threat, but you can continue to operate knowing that all those sensitive files have added securities on there. And again, this can be triggered in a number of different ways, whether it's existing sensors on the endpoint through the EDR solution or through Cigent, or if it's part of the security stack. And then once the threat has been cleared, maybe it's a false alarm, then that can be done by the SOC as well, the Blueshift SOC. So this is the shields up component, and we talk about this a lot. We visit a lot of customers, and when we show them this and show them how it works, they love it. Like, this is what we want. Like this is something that is very interesting to them. And I see a question from this: is the Secure Vault on-prem? This is an endpoint solution. So this is designed for laptops and end user systems. So it is not in the cloud kind of thing, but it can be managed via SaaS and through the SOC, right? They can manage it there. There's another question about attempt to open a file from inside Microsoft Office or Google Docs. How do we handle that? That is a fantastic question. And what we've seen is that many organizations that are using like OneDrive or Google Docs are also syncing those files. I do that, right? I sync those files locally so I can access them whenever, and we can apply those security controls to the synced data, and then that security control then remains with the drive, with the file. So if it's stored in Google Drive or OneDrive, those controls stay in place. So thanks for that question. It's a good one. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the advantages of doing this as a managed service with Blueshift. And Greg, I know you like talking about it.
Yeah, no problem. So, what Blueshift does, some of you are aware, we have a SOC, we have a platform that goes in that monitors and looks for anomalies in environments and things like that. So, and we also provide response, right? So, we actually include incident response up to containment as part of our service. So, part of that containment strategy is going to be, how are you stopping the adversaries from, both pivoting in the environment, getting access to more machines and data, right? So how can we stop them from getting access to data? You can do that in a few different ways by stopping command and control. But one of the things that, if you've ever done or had large scale incident response in large environments, you really don't know all the parts and pieces that are breached until you start, peeling back the layers of the onion, right? So you may get an indication that something has been compromised, or several things have been compromised, depending on how you detect it. And as you start peeling back layers of the onion, you see more and more things, and you need time, right? Now, we do pride ourselves on trying to be as fast as possible when it comes to incident response. I think personally, my opinion is that's the most important metric when it comes to response, is being able to do things extremely quickly. To loop through your OODA loops is faster than the adversary can, so you can defeat a much larger and more sophisticated adversary. But sometimes it does take time, and so one of the things that we can do for the customers to have Cigent Data Defense is we can initiate that shields up, right, from our SOC. So we know that, hey, we've detected something egregious. So by egregious, I mean, we're not going to do it if we see something that we have a question on, but we see something we know 100%. This is a TTP. This is an active adversary. This is an active compromise. We know someone's in the environment, or they have a bad piece of malware. Again, something egregious in the environment, we can immediately say, okay, from the SOC, the whole organization shields up on everybody, no matter where they're at. Now, it puts a little bit of burden on the end user, right? So now they're not going to be able to access their files. They're going to have to do that two-factor authentication, be able to access their files. But we know that no unauthorized individual is going to be able to exfiltrate, to be able to manipulate. Again, manipulate includes encryption, steal, or do anything to that data that's locked down by shields up. So we know we're protecting the data. Now we can focus on going through that incident response process, finding where the adversary is, removing them from the environment, stopping their command and control, looking for all the post-exploitation behavior that they do to make sure that the environment's clean, that we have it contained, and we can come up with a remediation plan. But in that interim time, we know that data is not going to leave. That's that allows us to do things even faster, right? Because part of what we're trying to do for people who don't have Cigent is protect that data. So, it may include things like stopping production for whatever the business is, and that can mean different things for different people. Stopping database servers, stopping file shares, and turning off computers, and all those sorts of things can be very disruptive. But only forcing users to do that second factor of authentication, right? While we're trying to do it, what we're doing is to stop the adversary. We can lessen the impact to that company, and that's really what defensive cyber needs to be about, is how can you lessen the impact. We talk about things about detection response and doing that quickly and lowering the dwell time of those attackers in an environment, because that lessens the impact both from a production standpoint and a financial standpoint in an organization when they're breached. So anything that helps us do that faster, right, it means less interruption to that business, and that's what we need to start doing. So the nice thing about obviously using Blueshift, we have lots of customers. We see lots of different adversary groups and what they're doing. You talked about Lockbit earlier. We've seen tons of activity around Lockbit and what their TTPs are. They were just taken down today. Other adversary groups, Full Typhoon. We saw indicators of that, even though we didn't know what it was in the beginning. But mapping out what those things, we see those types of tactics across all of our customers, and we can apply those across our customers, right? So when we see things in one, we obviously apply those to others, and gives us that real time threat intelligence that we talk about, and having the other, having obviously defensive cybersecurity is not a one and done solution. It's not our solution's not one and done. Buying Cigent's not one and done. It's really done. Again, it's like that onion. It's like putting layers on the onion. The more layers you have, the better off you are, and the more layers that those things we can integrate into our platform, the better it is. And Cigent's one of those key layers for us, with customers who have that solution to when things go bad, and eventually they will, that we can assure that the least amount of impact is done to the customer. We can respond to it as quickly as possible, and we can stop that data from leaving or being accessed by an adversary. So
Good stuff. So some of the use cases for using specifically this component, this layer of the onion, so to speak, where we talk to our to companies, they're interested in stopping ransomware, the data theft and extortion. That's a huge one. In addition to that is controlling access to sensitive data, and it could be in a shared environment. You just want to make sure that the system, you only have authorized people accessing that data. And of course, because of the ability to really have access controls for sensitive data or controlled data, complying with some of the regulatory mandates is huge as well. So let's talk about a couple of those. One that has been that we've heard a lot about lately and had lots of questions about it is CMMC. And this is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So in essence, this is a requirement for any organization that is part of we call the Defense Industrial Base, or DIB. And so that's means Department of Defense, government, or any private sector organization that is working with supporting the DIB, so to speak. So there are multiple levels of this depending on what you're actually doing. The first level is got some basic safeguards in place for managing the what's called federal contract information, or FCI. Layer 2, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more serious, is about protecting controlled, unclassified information. So if you think about some of the organizations that are supporting the defense industrial base, they've got a lot of data there. And the government is locking down, saying, hey, you really have to add this proper controls here. And then you get into level 3, and this adds even more requirements on how to protect data. Now, there are a ton of requirements in here to really be compliant with this, but some of the areas where Cigent and Blueshift can help specifically with this solution is to be able to encrypt sensitive content on these drives. So that's FCI data and CUI data, to be able to enforce those access controls, right? So you're enforcing access controls not only to people, but to processes and specific users, right? Be able to sanitize the data as well. So having that ability to completely wipe and destroy files that have been on a drive or on a system, and then being able to help with the operational incident handling. And Greg's been talking about that as well, as having that Blueshift team being able to handle that response, right, of when an incident does happen.
Yeah, and when it comes to like the technical controls of CMMC, for anybody who has to deal with that or deals with CUI information, that's it's a big strong point of our platform. Our platform can be put together to be FIPS compliant. All of our data stays on-prem, so you're not worried about FedRAMP and all those sorts of things. It maps to the NIST 800-172 controls very, very well, especially the more difficult technical controls that you have to do to both for level 2 and level 3. So, especially smaller DIBs, it can be problematic to have to stand up those capabilities on your own. By putting in our platform, you get a lot of those. We can't do the things that, guns, garden gates, those sorts of things that you have to do as part of policies and procedures internally. But from the technical side of things, the incident response plans, the monitoring of all the things, the log information, the inventory information, all that stuff that you have to collect that can be difficult for many DIBs. By just installing our platform, you get that just right out of the box. And so that helps them get on their way to meeting, the audited controls they're going to have to do for the CMMC certification. I personally think CMMC is a good thing, right? It started off as a really good thing. The U.S. government and defense industrial base was getting owned for years, and it was because it was a self-attested thing that, yeah, we're doing this. Oh, yeah, we'll probably do that. And then people are getting contracts and they're getting owned, and our government's losing secrets that they shouldn't have to lose. So I think having this is a good step forward. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a good step forward, and I think it's really needed for our national security. Complying with it is going to be painful, and we understand that. So we at least try to make that as from the technical side as easy as possible. It's not there's no one solution you're going to do that says, yep, we're 100% compliant. Even if you take all your stuff and put it all in GCC high, there's still more you have to do if you're going to be at that level 2, level 3, which probably most DIBs are going to be on that level 2, level 3. Most probably 80% are going to be in that level 2 environment, unless you're doing things like, just supplying food or something like that to the government, where you have a contract to do those sorts of things. But doing any kind of technical thing from a defense industrial base, you're going to be at that level 2 or level 3. So we have white papers for that. So if you guys are interested to see both what controls that we help with, both with Cigent software and what we do at Blueshift, we have papers on how our platform is ran, so that you understand how it fits into requirements when it comes to FIPS and those sorts of things as well. So, like I said, we can send us an email. We're happy to get that information out. But we really try to make it much easier to get your foot in the door with getting compliant, so that way you can keep your contracts.
Right. The other big one that we've seen and had inquiries about lately is HIPAA. And HIPAA has been around a long time, but what we've seen is that healthcare organizations are like the #1 target for attackers, right? And there's a number of reasons why. I mean, healthcare data extremely valuable. Just the having someone's PHI and contains social security, their medical history, all their insurance details, can be used very, very much so for identity theft. So we also see that they have increased connectivity. So if you think about most healthcare organizations, you've got all these clinics connected, all with APIs, and they're more easily compromised. And a part of that is that they lack the cybersecurity resources as well. So many of them are smaller practices and really could benefit from having some managed security like a Blueshift. And of course, they're highly regulated. So these are some of the things that healthcare organizations have to deal with. And where Cigent and Blueshift can help, and specifically Cigent for the endpoints and Blueshift for many of the other areas as well, is providing that privacy on endpoints, right? So you think about the staff that may have sensitive data that they store locally, being able to apply those access controls and encryption to that data, so that the PHI, even if a laptop is left in the back of an Uber or stolen, you can be assured that that sensitive data is locked down, right? So
Yeah, and that's the thing that, especially for people with HIPAA, they need to realize that, their compliance doesn't stop with their EHR, right? Most clinicians and small practices think, well, I have an EHR, it's HIPAA compliant, I'm good. They don't think about all the other data and all the other places where PHI sits, and how they need to protect that until something bad happens and they get a ransomware event they have to report. It's like, oh, what was on here? Well, yeah, we had all our documents here that had patient information in them, and the scope of that breach starts to expand, and then the costs start to expand. So, having those solutions in place ahead of time, again, will help lower that risk and make it not as painful.
Yes. So we are coming up on our time here. So we'll wrap up shortly here. Just to summarize, when we look at the managed Cigent Data Defense with Shields Up, what are we doing? We're helping you protect your data from threats. And regardless of how they get in, we're assuming that they're going to get in somewhere, making sure that that data is adequately protected. And this helps you reduce that business disruption, right? The downtime associated when you have an outbreak. With compliance, whether it's CMMC or HIPAA or even like GDPR or other types of regulations, whether they're industry or federal, anything that has to do with data privacy or data security access controls, these solutions can help. And of course, when you've got Blueshift, it becomes turnkey, right? You get a full stack managed service that includes these data protection controls as well as the whole security stack to make sure that your everything that you have is as secure as it can be. I'm going to flip this over and see if there's any additional questions. There is a question about will we share the webinar? Absolutely. So this will be available on demand probably in a couple of days. So we can do that. Any other questions? Or Greg, anything you want to add in before we wrap up?
Nope, I'm much better off the cuff than just because I'll be here for another hour if you let me just start evangelizing. So,
All right. Well, just one more thing then, and then we will call it a wrap. If you want to talk with us some more, you can, of course, visit our websites. The URLs are here, and we've got some pretty easy emails. If you want to get more details or set up some time to actually go and see a demo and see how this stuff actually works, or do a trial on the Cigent software or through Blueshift. So info@blueshiftcyber.com or info@cigent.com. And please follow us on LinkedIn and X, formerly Twitter. And there's our Shields Up guy there as well. So he's our hero here. But thank you very much. And a big thanks to you, Greg. I really appreciate you spending your time here to go through this with us.
thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining, and we appreciate your time, and keep that data secure.
Have a good day.